And everybody that
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday, December 4th Moscow City Council meeting. Welcome, everybody. Catherine?
Yes, please rise and let's say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Nice.
We will move on to item number 1, which is a consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second that.
Okay, we've got a motion by Jim and a second by Art to approve the consent agenda as is. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay, so we will move on to item number 2, which is a staff recognition report. Jen, what do we have this evening?
Excuse me. Yes, I'd like to introduce Steve Schulte, who is our street supervisor, to introduce our special guest who's making the recognition this evening.
Hi there. Thanks, Council, Mayor, for letting us have a minute to recognize one of our employees who recently received his Road Master certification. It's part of the T2 Center's classes that they offer. Let's see here. There's classes that range all the way from basic math to surveying, road building, drainage, snow removal, winter maintenance, a wide variety of classes that give our employees the extra education, extra skills that we can see every day. It's what helps us provide a high level of service, and we're grateful for employees like Dana that have made it through this program and help make Moscow streets a little better. So we've got Jeff Miles here with the T2 Center to help present that award.
Okay. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I really appreciate being here today. Once again, my name is Jeff Miles. I'm the administrator for the local Highway Technical Assistance Council. I really appreciate this time to come. One of the few things you get to do is to recognize people. This is a great program that the T2 Center has put on for a great many years. Started in 1986 and moved to LTAC in 2009. The T2 Center provides a lot of training to local highway jurisdictions to improve roadways. This last year, over 130 classes were provided with thousands of seats for employees to learn about roadways and their jobs and improve their skills. One of the most recent studies would tell you as local officials that for every if you use training, you can reduce the cost of highway maintenance by $6 to $14 for every $1 you put into training. So it's a really good program, and I think it's important to our communities. There are several kinds of training now available through the T2 Center. One kind that's new I'm going to mention first is the Leadership Academy. Our other two academies, of course, are the Road Scholar and the Road Master. To talk about the Leadership Academy that we've added is there's a lot of leadership skills necessary in our organizations as we have training and we have leadership we have to have within the road and highway districts, but also there's clerks and other officials through the cities, counties, and highway districts that can take advantage of leadership-type training, so we're glad to make this available. It's pretty impressive, and Layla Krall runs this program. For the last 5 years, the actual funding has gone down, but each year LTAC's found a way to add more classes and increase the amount of training available to you. The most recent training that you might have seen was we had Federal Highways perform a free class that talks about truck routes through our cities, an important topic that will be discussed, I think, for many years as shipping continues to play a vital role here in our state. The other program to start with is the Road Scholar program. You have to, over a 4-year period, you have to take 80 hours of coursework with most of them being required classes and 4 electives credits. This is a pretty good training for our employees and provides them a good basis for improvement of their skills. That's the first level. Tonight we have the opportunity to award a Roadmaster, which is yet another 80 hours of training, and with 4 electives as part of that, with more specialized and advanced skills that your employee has taken on to learn. This is a pretty high level of training, and we're really impressed by the large number of road scholars and roadmasters we're beginning to get as our program becomes more accepted through the state. It's available to all 288 jurisdictions, the local highway jurisdictions within the state, and we hope to continue and improve this program. Along with, I don't want you to forget about the Safety Fest programs I did mention already today. I think, I don't remember the timing this spring, but those are free training based around safety that's not only roadway oriented. If you happen to have other employees that have safety sensitive jobs, there are safety classes offered through the Safety Fest program throughout the state. There are 3 of them, one in North Idaho, one in Boise, and one in Pocatello next spring. Lastly, before I move on, I want to talk a little bit about the Innovation Award. I don't want you to forget about that because I think all of our communities are very innovative. I spend time down at the legislature, and often you hear the stories about things that they wish were better. And sometimes those are even hard for me to track down to see about how we can improve things. But I was always wanting to hear about the stories that I've heard in my 40-some years working in transportation in Idaho of all the innovative processes, the ways our cities and counties and highway districts save money for the people of Idaho. So the Innovation Award is available each year, and just recently up here we awarded today Clearwater County an Innovation Award on creating a tool where they can clean ditches with about a quarter of the effort and cost of the old manner of cleaning ditches. We have cities and we have highway districts that also win these awards, so I would encourage the city to think about any of their innovative processes in applying for that award. We take this information then back to the legislature to show them how you, the cities, make good use of every roadway dollar you're given. So today, I'd like to invite up Dana Rand to receive his award. Dana gets a recognition in a certificate here where he can take home, and also a really cool Carhartt jacket.
Oh,
Yeah.
So,
nice.
I think they're pretty nice, and hopefully they sized it right for you. So, because they put their name on, and it does say on the jacket right here, Roadmaster, so people know that he's put the time in and has the training, and they're pretty good because I'm the boss and I work there. They won't give me a jacket. I can't have one, and so this be your jacket. So congratulations. And I want to present you with your award, and we'll get some photos.
It's like we're back in the 1840s.
Yep. Big kapoof.
Dug air.
This is the hardest part, I promise you, Dana. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Don't run off, Dana. Thank you so much, Jeff, for that presentation. Dana, would you like to say a few words? Because we're all very, very proud of you. It's up to you.
Not especially. No.
You just make it. Well, you know what? That's kind of the neat.
I ramble on more than probably you do, but yeah.
Well, there you have it. Well, Dana, you know, the thing of it is we're very, very proud of whenever any of our folks go on and do extra things, and you getting the Roadmaster Award for us is a big deal. I know it's a big deal for Steve back there as well as Tyler Palmer and all of us, all of the staff, and so we really love it when our employees go all out and continue their education on whatever they're in and make it more professional. So that's a big deal for all of us. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And Jeff, thank you for that nice presentation as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one quick announcement, too, that I meant to mention earlier. There will not be an executive session this evening, just FYI for those in the audience and TV land. And so I'm going to move on to item number 3, which is mayor's appointments, and I have 2 of them. this evening. I've got Brandy Sullivan, Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, to go through the end of this month, 12/31/2017. Brandy's role kind of changed from being just a regular citizen to a counselor, and so she's going to finish the counselor's term off with that as well, so that's great. And Casey Schubert from the Human Rights Commission, expiration 12/31/2018, and I would entertain a motion from council to approve these two candidates.
I would move approval of both of those.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Catherine to approve these, and I'll start the roll with Art.
Aye.
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 Okay, well, thank you very much. Is Cassie here this evening? Well, one of the things, she's not here this evening, one of the things that's a big deal for all of us, especially for me as the folks that spend so much time on our various commissions, because we've got lots of volunteers in the city of Moscow, and that's what makes our city as good as it is, so we're really happy with that. Thank you so very much. Well, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the public comment period, mayor's response. We give 15 minutes for folks to get a chance to come up and tell us what concerns they may or may not have, as long as it's not something on this evening's agenda or something that is in front of the Board of Adjustment or Planning and Zoning. And if you come up, we'll give you 3 minutes, and please state your name and your address and come on up. Good evening, Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name's Tom Lamar. I'm a Latah County Commissioner, and it gives me great personal and professional pleasure to introduce Kathy LaFortune, who just wanted to say a few words to you, so I just wanted to give her a chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And Kathy, if you would please state your name and address as well, please.
My name is Kathy LaFortune, and I live at 1085 Rudd Road, Viola, Idaho. And I just put in my C1 to run for Latah County Commissioner, District 1, to take Dick Balser's place when he steps down at the end of 2018. I'm not here to tell you what my agenda is or what my issues are. I'm just here to listen and learn, and that's why I'm here tonight.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Kathy. Welcome. Okay, others out there before we move on? Okay, we will move on to item number 5, which is approval and execution of the Sewer Revenue Bond Series 20008 refinancing documents. And Sarah Banks, you will present, please, if you'd come up. Sarah? Good evening.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Hold on, let me get this turned on. Oh, there we go. There. Oh, that'll go up again. Okay. Got it. So, perfect. It's good now. Thanks. In 2008, the city issued $6 million in sewer revenue bonds in order to finance Phase 4 improvements to the water reclamation and reuse facility, formerly the wastewater treatment plant. These 2008 sewer revenue bonds will reach maturity in 2028 and carry interest rates ranging from 3.5 to 4.5%. Currently, the 2017 market is more favorable, and we're looking at refinancing the remaining debt, which is approximately $3.56 million. It's expected to result in a lower interest rate and reduced payments for the remainder of the life of the bond. And this refinancing would not extend the bonds past 2028. As you're aware, an RFP was issued, and we received 5 total proposals from 4 banks, and they were all received by the November 15th response deadline. Our financial advisor, Eric Herringer, and Danielle Quaid, who is part of our bond council, are here to explain the results and kind of explain the process from here that we plan to go through. Okay?
Very good.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
evening,
sir.
Eric.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Eric Herringer. I'm with Piper Jaffray, and I'm the municipal advisor for the city of Moscow. And what that means is I advise you on things related to your capital financing, bond financing programs. Let's see. I think I can. Do I need to tell you where I'm from?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Well, you can if you want.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
usual.
Why not? 101 South Capitol Boulevard, Boise, Idaho. Don't hold it against me.
Go Vandals.
So as Sarah mentioned, we met with the city administration team to talk about the refinancing opportunity sometime in early October. Had started actually having discussions in September about this, and presented some different options, ways to look at the refinancing. It was clear to us that there were some savings that could be achieved if the city refinanced these sewer revenue bonds. And we felt that the most efficient way to go about it was to put this RFP out to some local and regional banks to take on refinancing those bonds. And as Sarah mentioned, we had 4 banks respond. There were actually 5 proposals. I know that it's a little hard to read on the screen because the type is so small, but basically I ranked the proposals by interest rate, and the top proposal was from Zions Bank at 2.48%. It was a firm bid that they were willing to hold through the end of November. No fees and no prepayment penalties. So basically they're saying, we'll refinance this at 2.48 and you can pay us off anytime you want, which are some pretty favorable and flexible terms. Columbia Bank's proposal, which I ranked second, came in very similar in terms of a firm rate commitment, no prepayment penalty. The rate was just a little bit higher, 2.55%, but both very strong proposals. And then Wells Fargo and Washington Trust, both of which were indicative rates, which means that, hey, at the time they submitted the proposal, which was November 15, that's what the rate would be, but that would adjust if rates went up or down as you got to closing, and rates have actually gone up since that November 15 date. The bottom proposal from Wells Fargo, you'll notice, has a lower interest rate of 2.02, but that was problematic from our standpoint. It's not a proposal I could recommend because that rate was subject to change if there was a change in the corporate tax rate, and anytime the rate that you pay can change based on not things that are in your control, I tend to recommend against. And certainly now with tax reform coming out of Washington, D.C., it's very likely that the corporate tax rate could change and that rate would then get adjusted up from 2.02. So we felt, in looking at all that mix, that Zions had the strongest proposal. I've worked with Zions on these types of financings before and knew that we would have a pretty clear and clean path forward to completing the refinancing. So, in summary, this would basically allow you to lock in a rate of 2.48%. The rate, average rate you're paying on the old bonds is 4.33. So the math there is you're saving about 1.85%. The annual savings you'd see is about $41,000 per year. It totals up to around $444,000. Now, part of the way our debt laws work in Idaho is it makes sense for the city to put in some cash to keep the principal amount from exceeding the principal amount you're refinancing. And that's money that's coming from your existing debt service reserve that's you're overfunded in your debt service reserve. So you're putting in $100,000 to save $444,000. Net, the city is saving $344,000 as a result of the refinance, and that's net of the costs that for your financial advisor and for your bond attorneys. So those are real savings. And then this is just a chart that looks at before and after your existing bond payments on the left column, which add up to $4.8 million, and the new payments on the right column at just under $4.4 million. And there's your annual savings in that $40,000 to $45,000 range, adding up to $444,000, less the $100,000 cash that you put in at the front, and that's $344,000 total. So those numbers are pretty straightforward. We're not doing anything fancy. We're not extending the repayment term on the debt, and you're going forward with a lower interest rate, and you still have full flexibility to pay this thing off early, basically on any date with, I think, 30 days written notice going forward. with that, I'm going to turn it over to your bond counsel to describe the sort of legal steps. I think there's a question.
for Eric before
I
we
do have a question for him. On the Wells Fargo proposal, did you do the math on what the total savings would be there at the 2.02?
We didn't do it at 2.02. I think we could. What I did is I looked at what the potential corporate tax rate could go to, and it was pretty clear that their rate was assuming that, let me go back to that.
Well, if the tax bill would pass and corporate income tax rates went down, then that would allow them to
go back up to 255, basically.
Well, if they have lower tax rate, then that should increase their profit margin and make them able to lend money at a lower rate. Or at that rate, that shouldn't cause their rate to go up.
No, it does go up because the bonds are tax exempt, so they're not paying taxes on the interest earnings that they're going to get, and so they look at it as the tax equivalent. So if they had a taxable product, they'd need to earn a certain rate.
Because they're not placing these with someone else.
No, they're putting it in their portfolio.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're just comparing
Thank
this
you.
against the tax. Yeah. Okay.
I had one quick one in my financial naivete, but why did the payments go up and down during the payment schedule? What's the reason
Sure.
behind that? Because
No.
usually they
Yeah.
just proceed on at a steady pace.
Good question. The answer there is if you look at between 440, there's always going to be within $5,000 difference between the annual payments. Okay, and that's because bonds are sold in $5,000 increments.
Oh, okay.
So this old bond issue was sold to the public in $5,000 increments, and so you're always going to have some difference there.
Gotcha.
It's not a completely level to the penny amortization.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we're ready to hear from Danielle. Eric, thank you.
I think I just need that one right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Danielle Quaid. I'm with Holly Troxel, which is a law firm that's based out of Boise, but I'm lucky enough to practice out of the Coeur d'Alene office. So I just came down. We talked about if it was down or up. It's definitely down from there. So I am here to talk about the documents. You heard the fun stuff, which is that you're saving money. But there are some documents that go along with that we've been working on and that we've been negotiating with Zions and their council. And it's broken into two ordinances for a couple of reasons. The major reason is that my experience with these types of transactions is that wastewater is always going to need additional financing at some time. And in order to keep the documents and the requirements and your covenants consistent, we think that this master ordinance, supplemental ordinance way is the best way to manage that, because the master ordinance contains, and I'll point some of them out to you in a minute, a list of the covenants and the framework for issuing additional bonds, et cetera, that will govern all of your wastewater bond issues going forward. And then the supplemental ordinance just covers things related to this specific bond issue. So that when we go back, like for instance, right now you have these 2008 bonds and then you have 2011 bonds. And not all the provisions between those two ordinances are consistent, which means that your administration has to track and make sure that you're meeting these different covenant type requirements. So once you're still going to have the 2011s outstanding, and we're required to comply with all the covenants and requirements therein. But once those bonds are paid off, we'll be working under a framework where all the bonds are subject to the same requirements. So that's the reasoning for these two different ordinances. So I just want to point out a couple of things to you in each of them that I think are material. Starting with the master ordinance, and you don't have to track this on a page-by-page basis, but the primary thing is that you're pledging the net revenues of the system, right? You're pledging all the revenues you receive less your O&M costs. You have to keep operating the system to keep serving your customers and keep them paying their bills. So we have you do that first, operate the system first, and then the remaining revenues are all pledged to the debt service. If you look at the covenants are in, sorry, I'm losing my little page tabs here. All of the specific covenants related to all of your wastewater bonds going forward are in Section 11, which is on page 19. Probably the most important of those is the rate covenant. So you pledge that you're going to collect wastewater revenues, wastewater rates, to allow you to have 125% of debt service coverage each year. So that's 1.2 times your total debt payments will need to be covered in rates. That's a very typical requirement for wastewater. That just gives you, that gives you the cushion to pay your operations expenses. You're also required to continue to operate the system, to keep it in good repair, to provide your audited financial information, to diligently collect your revenues from your system, to carry insurance, things that would be expected. But the main thing is that you collect that 1.25 times your debt service coverage. In Section 13, you'll find the provisions for issuance of additional bonds. So this is what would govern your ability to issue additional bonds on a going forward basis in this system. It's different from your a general obligation bond if you were seeking such. This is just related to wastewater. But the main thing there is that you're going to have to evidence that you could meet that 1.25 times debt service coverage on your new bonds too. So you have to have revenue to cover that for both, or at least be able to predict revenue if you're increasing service and increasing revenue with your project. If you don't have any questions about the master ordinance, I'll turn to the supplemental.
Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Danielle. We'll move on. That'll be great.
Okay. So on the supplemental ordinance, as I said, this is the document that governs these bonds specifically. And so the things I want to point out, and some of these Eric covered, but in Section 2.06 on page 6, it states that these bonds are subject to optional redemption at any time. So you just give 30 days notice, and you can prepay them at any time, which gives you a great amount of flexibility. I also wanted to point out in Section 3.01, which is on page 7, that pursuant to your prior bonds, your 2008 bonds and your 2011 bonds, you used to be required to carry a reserve requirement or hold a reserve fund. That the market has moved away from requiring a reserve fund on wastewater because it is such a consistent and predictable revenue stream. Everyone wants to flush their toilet. They all pay their bills. You can go out and collect against them if they don't. So that reserve is no longer required as much in the marketplace. So as I said, while the 2011 bonds are still outstanding, you'll still have to have that reserve, and we calculated funding that reserve. But once those bonds are paid off, you'll be free of that reserve requirement. And then it goes on a bond issue by bond issue basis. So like Department of Environmental Quality, which is a likely funder for a wastewater project, they do require a reserve. But they allow it to be funded over 10 years. So if you ended up with additional bonds sold in the market, you would not have to have a reserve. If you ended up with a DEQ transaction, you'd have the flexibility to fund it the way they provide you fund it, which is basically paying 110% of your debt service every year. So that's a big change that will give you more flexibility moving forward. Then Section 3.04 authorizes the escrow account. So these bonds, the 2008 bonds, are not actually callable. They can't be paid and redeemed until April 1 of 2018. So the money will be put into an account at the end of December when we close the bond issue and held there in a secure account until the bonds can be paid. And that's pursuant to an escrow agreement with U.S. Bank, who is the trustee on those 2008 bonds. So we're authorizing you to enter into that agreement. And I think I wanted to point out the pledge of net revenues, but we've already talked about that. So that's kind of the meat of the supplemental ordinance. The supplemental ordinance also authorizes you to enter into the bond purchase agreement, which is another document that I believe you have in front of you. That really is the agreement where Zions Bank says, yes, we'll buy all the bonds from you, and you say, we'll sell them to you, and it's subject to certain conditions like the delivery of my bond opinion at the end of the transaction. And I don't have any other specific things I want to point out on that bond purchase agreement, but I'd certainly be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Questions for Danielle?
My questions just had to do with our actions. And so you're actually
Our
addressing...
actions are 5 things.
Yeah. So you addressed all the... when I read through that, I wasn't even completely clear on understanding that. So now you've...
Okay.
And I'll reissue once Danielle's
Yeah.
done with her presentation. I'll explain that a little bit too, Kathy.
Thank you. Sure, and I'd be happy to answer questions as you walk through the actions too, if they come up.
Okay, well, I think we're ready to go, and there's 5 actions that we have to take
Right.
this evening, and they got to kind of go in sequence. Number 1 is, and as we move along, we'll do one at a time, of course. And the first one is approve the acceptance of Zions Bank proposal for refinancing and refunding of the Series 20008 City of Moscow sewer wastewater revenue bonds. That's the first action that needs to take place.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we Do what you said.
Approve
I don't want
acceptance.
to say it all again.
Yeah. Second,
But I will if you want me to.
I'll second approving the Zions Bank proposal for refinancing, refunding a Series 2008 City of Moscow Sewer Wastewater Revenue Bond.
Okay, Lori, did you get that? Okay, we got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve the acceptance of Zion's Bank proposal for refinancing, refunding of the Series 2008 City of Moscow Sewer Wastewater Revenue Bonds, and I will start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Okay, action number 2 is to approve the attached master bond ordinance that Daniel spoke about first. So,
I move approval of the attached master bond ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
okay, we've got a motion by Art and a second by Gina to approve the attached master bond ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary. I'll start to roll with you, Art.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll move right on to item number 3, approve the attached supplemental bond ordinance.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the attached supplemental bond ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay, but before we do that, everybody, I guess I need to probably read ordinance 2017-12. Is that correct, Lori? Okay. That's the master bond ordinance, and then we'll come right back to this master bond ordinance 2017-12, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Latah County, Idaho, authorizing the issuance and sale of wastewater revenue bonds from time to time to provide funds necessary to finance or refinance improvements to the city's wastewater system, fixing the form, covenants, and certain terms of the bond to be issued, providing for the registration and authentication of the bonds, pledging revenues for payment of debt service of the bonds issued hereunder, providing for certain federal tax covenants with respect to the bonds, redesignating certain funds and accounts of the city, and providing for other matters properly related to thereof. We good on that, Lori? Okay, now we have a motion to approve the supplemental bond ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary, and that was a motion by Gina and a second by Catherine. Start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Okay, item number 4 is...
You got to read that
shoot.
one.
Yeah, it's over here.
You know what? I got 2 more of these down the road this evening I got to do. So this is supplemental ordinance 2017-13, a supplemental ordinance of the City of Moscow, Latah County, Idaho, authorizing the issuance and the sale of city's wastewater revenue refunding bonds, Series 2017, in a principal amount of $3,560,000 to provide funds for necessary to refinance improvements to the city's wastewater system, ratifying the execution and delivery of a bond purchase agreement providing for the private sale of the 2017 bond, pledging revenues for payment of the 2017 bond, fixing the form and terms of the 2017 bond, and providing for other matters properly related to thereto, and providing for the effective date hereof. Okay, now we will move on to item number 4, which is approve the purchase agreement.
I would make a motion to approve the purchase agreement.
Second.
Okay. Okay, we've got a motion by Brandy and a second by Catherine to approve the purchase agreement as said, and I will start with
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Okay,
You're up.
I'm getting it. Here we go.
There it is. Okay.
Was that an aye?
Yeah, sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, now we will move on to item number 5, which is authorize the staff to finalize the escrow agreement with the escrow agent.
I would so move.
I would second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Art and a second by Brandy to authorize the staff to finalize the escrow agreement with the escrow agent. We're good. I'll start with you, Brandy.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Well, thank you very much. I think we got through all that.
Yeah,
You did. That was
you
a lot of
summarized
work.
that really fast, too.
You did
That
a
was
good
a
job.
lot of stuff you summarized.
Easy way to make $344,000.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you think?
thank you. Congratulations. It's always great to
Proud of
save money
people
like
like
that.
Yeah, Sarah explained it really well at our committee meetings. Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
And I just want to make one comment too on this as we're going along through the different things that we do, and Lord only knows what in the world's going to happen with the Fed and all the other different things that happen to us in this fine country of ours. So anytime we can save some money like this, hallelujah, and good job by everybody that was a part of it. So thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, which was amendment to MCC Title 9, Chapter 6, 7, and 8, alcohol catering permits. Rod Hall, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. The proposed amendment to our city ordinance before you tonight deals with catering permits. Under Idaho code, the city has the authority to require anybody who wants to sell alcohol within the city to be required to have a city license. They're required to have a state license and a county license, and the city exercises the authority to make them get a city license. And if somebody wants to get a temporary license to be able to sell off their premises, off their licensed premises, that's the catering permit, and we have a process for that. What brought this issue today is that there's been a different trend, or a growing trend in this community, across this country actually, on microbreweries and wineries. Especially in this region, they seem to be a growing industry, and they seem to contribute or be contributing to the local economy. We had a request this summer from a nonprofit group that was hosting an event, wanted to allow a microbrewery that doesn't reside within the city but resides within the county, and wanted them to be able to cater the function. But under our city ordinance, the way I read it, is that they would have to have a city license before they could get the catering permit. The proposed amendment before you tonight would say that for a catering permit, if somebody has a state license and a county Idaho license, then they would be able to get a catering permit to be able to serve functions or festivities within the city of Moscow if they are qualify under Idaho code as a brewery, and they already can do that as a winery under state law. At the administrative committee meeting, we had a discussion about whether we wanted to limit the amount or who could be qualified for this under breweries, whether it be microbreweries or any breweries. Under state code, there's a differentiation between just a brewery like an Anheuser-Busch in eastern Idaho versus a small microbrewery. And the cutoff level was if you made 30,000 barrels or less, you'd be considered as a microbrewery. Basically, under the state code is that goes towards tax revenues or how much required tax you have to do. So we thought maybe that might be a break if we wanted to limit it to a certain amount of barrels, keep it to the small mom-and-pop microbreweries. The administrative committee decided they thought that anybody who qualifies as a brewery should be allowed to do that. So the amendment before you here tonight includes, if you qualify under the definition of a brewer under the state and you have a state license and a county license, that you would be able to get a catering permit. Then one other thing I wanted to point out in the ordinance, talks about a difference about how the duration for the catering permits. State law, we did this a few years ago, extended from 3 days to 5 days. Our city code was amended to make it up to 5 days. But under state code, wineries can get a catering permit up to 7 days. Mm-hmm. So we made the distinction in here that if you are a winery, and if we have some kind of event, that they could get a catering permit up to 7 days. And so with that, I don't think I have anything further. It would just be amending to allow if somebody has a catering or eligible for a catering permit if they were a brewery or a winery licensed in the state of Idaho.
Okay, as you said, Rod, this was reviewed by the administrative committee on November 27th.
Mm-hmm. In our discussion, we ended up talking that I think Art said it best. So, Art, would you like to kind of encapsulate your
You want me to
thoughts?
Remember what I said?
Yeah, you did. I mean, we just
only
talked.
a week ago, Art.
We just talked about that we didn't want it to force people to have to choose micro breweries.
Yeah.
If I remember.
And he was also very jet-lagged.
I was. But the upshot was that it seemed to be somewhat micromanaging the desires of the people who want to put on the festivity and to allow them to decide who they wanted to do the catering and without any restrictions. And also the fact that although it doesn't seem likely in the near future, there's always the potential for a local brewery to go over 30,000, and then they would be aced out despite their local locations. So we thought that it would be wise just to let sort of a laissez-faire and let the organizers do the deciding of what they wanted to have catered.
And so we brought it to the council to decide, to see if you thought that that was a good idea or not, and you could, this would be the time to talk about it.
Sure, absolutely.
I think it's a great idea because we have a big proliferation of wineries and breweries in Latah County and Nez Perce County, and I think in the spirit of cooperation with all the businesses in our local area, that this is a great ordinance that helps us cooperate with them and expand business. It helps us all.
Right.
Jeannie, you had a comment.
I think this is one of those moments, sir, where we're really putting our money where our mouth is. We say we're open for business, and this shows it, and it makes it a very common sense, good approach to things. So I'm very in favor of it.
Randy.
I was in that administrative meeting as well, and I agree with what Catherine and Art have said, and would like to not have restrictions based on the size of the brewery. I also, in thinking about it a little longer, just in general, I think it's somewhat unusual with catering events here. Most people tend to go to local businesses who already have their catering permits and then get whichever type of beer or wine they want, and sometimes they want microbrews and sometimes they want the macro brews. So I just think more choices, more options can meet the needs of everybody and what they have in mind. So.
Okay.
So with that, I move to approve the proposed amendments to City Code, Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapters 6, 7, and 8 to allow breweries and or wineries located outside the city to cater within the city limits with an alcohol catering permit under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the proposed amendments of Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapter 6, 7, and 8 to allow breweries and or wineries located outside of the city to cater within the city limits with an alcohol catering permit under the suspensions of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that be read by title and published by summary. I'll start the roll with Art.
Aye.
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 Okay, now we have an ordinance 2017-14. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapters 6, 7, and 8, relating to alcohol catering permits, and providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 7, which is the 2018 City Limits Ordinance, and we have got Tyler Palmer here with us this evening.
This is almost going to be as exciting as interest rates, I promise. Mayor, Council, I appreciate
You're going to save us that much money.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. If you indulge me just a little bit, I'd just circling back to Dana Rand. You know, the employees that we have here that we're able to maintain, it's really amazing people. Dana's been with us for almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years next month. And he's just such a great example of the commitment that our employees have to the city. You know, Dana's kind of a renaissance man. A lot of the traffic box wraps that you see are photographs that Dana's taken, a very accomplished photographer who participates every year in Art Walk at the water department. We try and have city employees who are also artists display their work there. We had 2 of them tonight. Steve Schulte paints, Dana does photography. And it just really contributes in a lot of different ways to the city. He's a captain with our volunteer fire department and puts in countless hours doing that. He's one of the first people in when it's time to plow snow and one of the last people to leave. He's just a really committed, dedicated employee of the city of Moscow and just a wonderful guy to have around. And Jeff mentioned the Technical Innovation Awards for the T2 Center. We have a sneaking suspicion that in June at the AIC conference, the city of Moscow might get some good news on that front as well. So, pretty excited about that for that conference. So, anyway, I'll get to the exciting business at hand, which is our definition of our corporate boundaries. This is one that we have to do annually. So really, it's just a matter of taking a look and seeing if we've had any annexations in the past year. When we have had annexations, as we have had this year, it requires an ordinance, and so that's what we're here for tonight. So the ordinance that's in the packet defines a new boundary. We had a small area up there off of War Bonnet that was annexed, and it's just a requirement that we redefine that here tonight. And so unless you want me to read a lot of hences and latitudes and longitudes, I stand for any questions you might have about this.
Tempting.
You did proofread all those, didn't you?
Every one of them, Jim. Every one of them. Caught a few decimal points in the wrong place. You bet I did.
I didn't realize there were so many different degrees. I mean, I'm pretty up on globes and things. This is amazing within our own city of Moscow here. Okay. Any questions for Tyler?
No, but I'd approve the attached ordinance establishing the new legal description for the city of Moscow corporate limits under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Art and a second by Jim to approve the attached ordinance establishing the new legal description for the city of Moscow corporate limits under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary. I'll start with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Tempting, though.
And here's another ordinance, 2017-15. An ordinance amending the ordinance of 2016-16 of the city of Moscow, Idaho, establishing and declaring in this ordinance corporate limits of the city of Moscow, Latah County, Idaho, in accordance with the provisions of the laws of the state of Idaho relating to the establishment of the boundaries and annexation of adjacent and continuous territory, providing for the repeal of any other ordinance or parts of ordinance in conflict therewith, providing a severance and savings clause, and for the effective date of this ordinance. Whew. And I am so happy that nobody has to read this. Geez, I think after about 2 sentences, nobody have a clue what we're even talking about. So we will move on with that. That is the last of our agenda, folks, and so we'll start with reports. I'll start with you, Jim.
I have nothing to report, sir. My meetings all start this week for the month, so.
Okay.
As was previously pointed out, I was jet lagged last week, and that means I was not in the continent or even the hemisphere for most of November.
Okay.
I have nothing.
Okay, I'll move on with Catherine then.
I attended the Moscow Fire Department annual banquet, and it was really interesting to see the presentation of all the awards for and just the camaraderie with they had with about their job and saving lives, and it was really good to see all those people kind of reveling in the things that they do together. It was a really nice evening. And then I just thought I'd bring this because this is out, the Moscow Parks and Rec. In the mail. They're out, yay.
Yep, they are.
And there's a whole thing on trees, a full page on anything you want to do with trees. Very exciting. And then 3 more meetings for the subcommittee for transportation, and then the presentation to the Transportation Committee on the 14th.
Okay. All right. Gina.
I have no reports for you. However, a number of us today did attend the Association of Idaho Cities Academy district meeting, and it was exciting. It was kind of fun to go back through what I learned in a whirlwind a year ago, June, and it was good. I enjoyed it, and I hope that I keep going back there and learning every time I go.
Okay.
I don't have any reports, but I've been gradually making my way around to meet different directors and commission chairs, and so have been met with Dwight and just kind of trying to get caught up here. So.
Well, with that said, Brandy has been flooded with an immense amount of information these last few weeks, and she's really held up very, very well to that. Some of the meetings I was at, we had November 29th, we had an airport board meeting, and we're clipping along pretty nicely with our airport, and things are moving on. There'll be a discussion probably later on in 2018 about the possibilities of what we may or may not do with the new terminal, so that's something exciting down the road. November 30th, I had an AIC board meeting. It was a telephone meeting that I had, but there was one that was held in Boise, and we talked about a bunch of different legislative things that are going to be coming up in front of us in our January meeting that we'll be going to. So we can talk to a bunch of our legislators about different things that we'd like. And, of course, another one of those is that local option tax that we always ask about every single year, and that's a tough one to get through. But one of these days, it'll work for us. December 2nd, we had the Fireman's Ball, is exactly what Catherine said, and we had one recipient of a 45-year award, Kenny Robinson, which was a big deal. And, it's kind of an interesting thing. We even at the AIC meeting that we were at today, the Academy, and our attorney asked, do we still have a volunteer fire department in Moscow? And, of course, this with absolute pride. I said, absolutely. And if you could see the camaraderie that went on that evening, it was very, very nice. And, it just doesn't happen by accident that you have somebody that's got 45 years plugging away on that. And that's a commitment to the community. And it's a big, big deal for us. And those men and women do a wonderful job. And I always take pride in the young folks coming up through the ranks, because they're the ones that are going to be leading the charge down the road for all of us. And I love that. And then, of course, today, December 4th, there was a bunch of us at the AIC Academy District meeting in Lewiston, myself as well as Art, Gina, Brandy, as well as Ann. We took her along, too. So we all learned a lot. And I'll tell you something. I go to these meetings a couple of times, the district ones, at least twice every year, and not only the midwinter one with our legislators, but also our summer annual one, and then several others as a board member for AIC. And every single one of these, you'll learn a little something new, and so that's where we can all grow. And our cities in Idaho here, there's over 200 of them. We can have an effect with our legislators, and we just need to keep plodding away and poking away and making it happen for us. And so with that, Jen, I know we have got a breakfast meeting coming up. I'll let you talk about that.
We do. I'll start actually with tomorrow evening. We have our town and gown soiree where we mix and mingle with the ASUI students and executive leadership at the University of Idaho. We're hosting that at the Intermodal Transit Center. We try to do that twice a year, and it's our turn to host, so we thought we'd meet them in the middle there at the ITC. So we'll be celebrating with them tomorrow evening. And then we have I'll go back to Wednesday morning, breakfast meeting with the various leaders, Chamber, U of I, School District, all of our partners in the morning. Followed by Thursday, the Light Up the Night Parade and Winter Wonderland tree lighting, which starts at 6:15. We'll have the Palouse Choral Society. Chamber's got events going on in their business with the window ballerinas, which always warms my heart a little bit. Our Light Up the Night Parade and tree lighting will happen that night. And then I'll fast forward again to to December 15th. The Russell School has carolers that come down to City Hall. So they'll come down and join us at about 9:30. So we won't have a council meeting between now and then, so I thought it'd be good to mention that as well.
And
a lot of activities this time of year.
The breakfast meeting Wednesday is at Wallace Complex?
Wallace Complex at the University of Idaho,
okay.
Yes.
Very good. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I entertain a motion to adjourn from somebody.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 7:53. Thank you, everybody.